He was a father who had never taken his wife or children on a vacation. Life's hardships, bills, and endless struggles had always stood in the way. His children grew up hearing stories of other kids' trips, but never made any memories of their own. Finally, after years of sacrifice, he saved just enough for one family vacation, though he feared it would expose his failures rather than bring joy. What he did not expect was that this trip would not only change how his family saw him, but transform the rest of their lives forever. The morning sun had barely risen when Daniel Harris lifted his worn-out toolbox from the corner of his small rented room. His back ached from the night before, his eyes half open from too little sleep. He worked 2 jobs, one at a construction site by day, another as a night security guard in a local supermarket. His life had become an endless loop of labor and exhaustion, with no space left for dreams. As he walked toward the bus stop, the city was already alive. The rich in their cars rushing to air-conditioned offices, the poor dragging their feet toward another day of survival. Daniel was among the latter. His hands were rough with calluses, his boots cracked, his shirt faded to a dull gray from years of sweat and sun. But he carried himself with quiet dignity, a man doing what he must for those he loved. When he reached the construction site, the foreman barked instructions. Daniel nodded without a word. He was not the type to complain. He lifted heavy cement bags, mixed mortar, and climbed scaffolds under the scorching heat. As he worked, his thoughts drifted to his daughter's school project, his son's upcoming birthday, and the unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen table. I am working every hour God gives me, he thought bitterly, yet I cannot give my children the simple happiness other fathers can. What kind of father am I? When the day ended, he did not go home to rest. He walked to the supermarket for his night shift. As a security guard, trading his dusty clothes for a blue uniform that barely fit. From midnight to dawn, he sat by the glass doors, watching customers come and go. Couples bought groceries for fancy dinners. Teenagers came for snacks after movies. And Daniel sat there, nodding politely, wondering what it felt like to live without constant worry. By the time he returned home, the streets were empty, the first light of dawn just touching the rooftops. His small house, with its peeling paint and flickering porch light, felt both like a sanctuary and a prison. He opened the door quietly so as not to wake his family. But his wife Sarah was already up, preparing breakfast and packing lunches for the kids. She smiled, tired but warm. "You did not sleep again, did you?" she asked softly. "A few hours?" he replied, kissing her forehead. "I'll rest later." "You say that every day," she sighed, handing him coffee. Their marriage was built on quiet sacrifices. Sarah worked part-time at a tailor shop, and when she was not there, she took care of their 2 children. She managed the home with grace, though deep down, she worried about Daniel's fading strength. At breakfast, their children filled the room with chatter. Lily, the 14-year-old daughter, spoke carefully, always trying not to burden her parents. She was bright and observant, often hiding her feelings behind a calm smile. Ethan, the 10-year-old son, was the opposite, cheerful, innocent, but easily disappointed when he saw how different their lives were from others. That morning, the children spoke about their classmates' vacations. "Dad, my friend Jason went to Disneyland," Ethan exclaimed, his eyes wide. "He met Mickey Mouse and took pictures in front of the castle." Lily added shyly, "And my friend Mia just came back from a beach resort. She said they stayed in a hotel with a swimming pool inside." Daniel forced a smile, pretending to share their excitement. "Sounds fun," he said, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate. "Maybe one day we'll go somewhere too." Ethan's eyes sparkled. "Really, Dad? Where?" "We'll see," Daniel said, forcing cheerfulness into his tone. "When things are better." But as the children laughed and continued their chatter, Daniel's gaze fell on the cracked floor tiles and the flickering light bulb above the table. His chest tightened. He knew better never seemed to come. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Daniel sat alone in the small living room. The only light came from the old lamp beside the couch. He rubbed his hands together, staring at the calluses, the dirt embedded in his skin that never seemed to wash away. He whispered to himself, "Other fathers take their families on vacations. They make memories, and I cannot even afford a weekend away." A single tear escaped his tired eyes. He wiped it quickly, ashamed of his own weakness. He told himself to be strong. For Sarah, for Lily, for Ethan. The next day, as Daniel walked to the bus stop, he overheard two neighbors chatting near the corner store. "Such a hardworking man, that Daniel," one woman said. "Yes," the other replied. "But all that work and still no progress. Poor children, they've never been anywhere." Daniel paused mid-step. Their voices stung like salt in an open wound. He wanted to defend himself, to shout that he was doing his best, but instead, he just lowered his head and kept walking. Those words echoed in his mind all day. He cannot even take his kids anywhere. He felt smaller with every repetition. By the time night came, those whispers had turned into a storm inside his heart. He looked at his reflection in the store's security mirror during his shift. A man aging too fast, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow from exhaustion. Maybe they are right, he thought bitterly. Maybe I am failing, not just as a provider, but as a man. He clenched his fists, silently promising himself that someday, somehow, he would give his family the joy they deserved, even if it took everything he had left. The following week rolled by much like any other. Long hours, short nights, and the same quiet exhaustion hanging in the air. But one evening, something happened that would slowly begin to change everything. It was a rainy Thursday evening. Daniel returned home from his night shift earlier than usual. His shoes were soaked, his jacket heavy with the smell of wet concrete. When he entered the house, he found Ethan sitting at the dining table, coloring in a half-torn sketchbook. The boy looked up, his face lighting with excitement. "Dad, look what I made." Daniel smiled faintly, hanging his jacket. "What's this, champ?" "It's my school project, my dream vacation," Ethan announced proudly. Daniel walked closer, leaning down to look. On the paper was a crayon drawing, the four of them sitting under a big tree by the sea. There were no airplanes, no hotels, no theme parks, just the family together, smiling, their feet in the sand. Daniel blinked. "Why not draw something bigger, son? Like a big resort or Disneyland?" Ethan shrugged, concentrating on shading the waves. "Because I don't care about that, Dad. I just want us to go somewhere. Anywhere. Just together." Those words landed softly but powerfully, like a whisper that shook Daniel's soul. He stared at the drawing for a long moment. The faces of his children, so happy in that simple scene, burned into his mind. That night, when everyone was asleep, Daniel sat again in the dim light of the living room. Ethan's drawing lay on the table beside his calloused hands. His heart ached with both love and shame. "My son's dream is not about Disneyland," he thought. "It's about me being there. And yet, I haven't even given him that." In that quiet moment, he made a decision that felt both foolish and brave. He would take his family on a vacation, no matter how small, no matter how hard. From the next morning onward, Daniel began to save. Quietly, secretly. He stopped buying coffee from the vendor near the bus stop. He walked to work instead of taking the bus. He even started taking on weekend shifts, saying yes to every extra hour offered. The construction site foreman noticed. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Harris. You'll break your back at this rate. Better to break it now than regret later," Daniel said with a tired smile. At home, Sarah began to notice the changes. He seemed more withdrawn, more exhausted than usual. One evening, she confronted him gently while folding laundry. "Daniel, you've been working too much. You barely eat, and you come home dead tired. What's going on?" He looked at her, but didn't answer immediately. How could he tell her? He wanted it to be a surprise. "Nothing to worry about," he said softly. "Just want to make sure we're safe. You know how it is." Sarah sighed, sensing there was more to it, but choosing not to press further. She had learned long ago that her husband carried burdens in silence, like stones in his pockets, never complaining, never asking for help. Weeks turned into months. Each day, Daniel tucked away a few dollars in a small metal box he hid beneath a loose floorboard under their bed. It was not much, but slowly, the coins and crumpled bills began to grow into a small pile of hope. One night, Daniel came home, limping from the construction site. A heavy metal pipe had grazed his leg. He sat on the couch, exhausted, staring at the floor. Sarah rushed to him. "You need rest. No more double shifts, Daniel," she said firmly. "I can't stop now," he replied quietly. She looked at him, her voice trembling. "We don't need anything fancy. We just need you. Please, don't destroy yourself." He smiled faintly, covering her hand with his. "What if I told you that I'm not doing this for money? What if I'm doing it for something that will make you and the kids smile?" Sarah frowned, confused, but before she could ask more, he kissed her forehead. "You'll see soon," he said. 3 months later, on a bright Saturday morning, Daniel came home early with a small envelope in his hand. His heart raced with nervous excitement. The children were sitting on the floor, watching cartoons, and Sarah was in the kitchen peeling potatoes. Daniel called everyone to the table. "Family meeting," he said with a grin. The children looked at each other in surprise. He rarely smiled like that. He pulled out the envelope and spread its contents on the table. 4 bus tickets and a printed booking confirmation for a small seaside guest house 2 towns away. "We're going on vacation," he said softly. The words hung in the air for a moment. Ethan blinked. "Wait, what, like a real vacation?" Lily gasped, covering her mouth. "Dad, are you serious?" Sarah froze, potato peeler in hand, her eyes wide. "Daniel, we can't afford." He cut her off gently. "It's paid for. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. A few days away, just the 4 of us. No work, no worries." Ethan jumped up, hugging his father tightly. "Dad, you're the best. I knew you'd take us someday." Lily joined in, wrapping her arms around them both. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he had done something truly right. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "You shouldn't have. You need rest, not more work." Daniel looked at her tenderly. "I'll rest when I see you smile again." That evening, the house felt different, brighter, warmer. The children ran around, planning what to pack. Sarah cooked Daniel's favorite meal for the first time in months. Laughter echoed through the small rooms as Daniel watched them. He felt something stirred deep inside, a quiet sense of pride he had not felt in years. For once, he was not just surviving, he was giving. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Daniel opened Ethan's drawing again. He placed it gently beside the bus tickets on the table. In the dim glow of the kitchen lamp, the crayon sea shimmered faintly under the light, and Daniel whispered, "We're going, son. Just like your drawing. We're going to make it real." He smiled to himself, a tired, humble smile, but behind it burned something new. Hope. The morning of their long-awaited trip finally arrived. For the first time in years, the Harris household was alive with laughter before sunrise. The small house buzzed with energy. Ethan bouncing with excitement, Lily carefully folding her clothes, and Sarah rushing from room to room, making sure nothing was forgotten. Daniel, standing near the doorway, watched it all in quiet amazement. The sight of his children smiling made every sleepless night, every blister, every aching muscle worth it. The packing was, of course, A comedy of errors. Lily, did you pack the toothpaste? Sarah called from the kitchen. Yes, Mom. And the comb? Maybe? Meanwhile, Ethan was stuffing his small backpack with half his toy collection. Ethan, Daniel laughed. We're going to the beach, not moving houses. But Dad, what if my soldiers get bored? Sarah shook her head, smiling despite her nerves. Let him take them, Daniel. They've waited long enough for this. The family's luggage was a patchwork of mismatched bags and grocery store totes. No fancy suitcases, no polished zippers, just bundles of hope and excitement. By the time they locked the door and stepped outside, the sun had just begun to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. For a moment, Daniel paused at the gate, looking back at their little home. The peeling paint, the squeaky door, the patch of overgrown grass. It had been a cage and a shelter. But today, for the first time in years, it felt like a place they were leaving behind to breathe freely, not to escape. The bus station was crowded and loud, filled with people clutching tickets, children crying, vendors shouting. For the Harris family, it was both thrilling and intimidating. Daniel held their tickets tightly in his pocket, as if afraid they might vanish. They stood in line, surrounded by travelers with shiny luggage and clean clothes. The difference between themselves and others was impossible to ignore. Sarah noticed Daniel's shoulders stiffen, his jaw tighten. She leaned close and whispered, "Don't look at them. Look at us. This is our time, Daniel." Her words softened him. He nodded silently. The children, oblivious to the comparisons, were full of wonder. Ethan pointed at everything. The buses, the pigeons, even the snack stalls. "Dad, can we get that big corn, please?" Daniel hesitated, checking his wallet. The roasted corn cost more than he'd like, but he nodded anyway. Just one for all of us to share. They ate it together, laughing at Ethan's messy face. It wasn't much, but it felt special, like the first taste of freedom. When their bus finally arrived, they climbed aboard, finding seats near the back. The air smelled faintly of diesel and sweat, but to them, it was the scent of adventure. Ethan pressed his face against the window, watching the city blur past as the bus roared to life. "Dad, look! We're really going!" Daniel smiled, his heart swelling. He reached for Sarah's hand. "Yes," he whispered, "we really are." As the bus rolled down the highway, the landscape began to change. Tall buildings giving way to fields, fields to forests, forests to open skies. The rhythm of the engine was steady and comforting. Lily leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder, while Ethan fell asleep against Daniel's arm. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was peace. But beneath that peace, Daniel's mind raced. What if something went wrong? What if the hotel was terrible? What if he couldn't afford the food or the transportation once they arrived? His heart pounded with a quiet fear, the fear of disappointing the people he loved most. He glanced at his children, sleeping so trustfully beside him, and clenched his jaw. "No," he told himself, "I will not let them see me worry. Not this time." Hours later, the bus curved along a road where, in the distance, the horizon shimmered with blue. Ethan woke first. "Is that the ocean?" he gasped. Lily sat up too, her eyes wide. "It's beautiful." Sarah smiled, resting her chin on her hand. "It's been so long since I've seen it." Daniel looked out the window and felt something shift deep inside him. The sight of the sea, vast, endless, unjudging, washed over him like forgiveness. For years he had felt trapped, small, invisible. But here, the world suddenly seemed wider than his failures. The bus stopped in a small coastal town, a humble place where the streets smelled of salt and fried fish. There were no luxury resorts, no polished signs, just little guest houses with faded paint and cheerful locals calling out greetings. They walked down a narrow lane until they found their small guest house. its wooden sign swinging in the breeze. It wasn't much. Cracked walls, old furniture, and a fan that creaked when it turned. But it had a balcony that looked out toward the distant sea. Ethan ran to the window, pressing his hands against the glass. "We can see the ocean from here." Lily laughed, her face glowing with genuine excitement. "This is perfect, Dad." Sarah turned to Daniel, smiling softly. "You did this," she whispered. "You gave them this moment." Daniel's throat tightened. "It's not much," he murmured. "It's everything," she said. Later that evening, after dinner at a small roadside eatery, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony alone. The sound of the waves carried through the night air. He leaned on the railing, staring at the moonlit sea. Despite the beauty, a storm of thoughts swirled inside him. Was this enough? Would his children remember this trip with joy or disappointment? Had he done enough as a father? He could hear their laughter from inside. Sarah telling a funny story. Ethan giggling uncontrollably. Lily humming a tune. And then he realized, maybe this was what happiness truly looked like. Not grand, not perfect, but real. He whispered to the night, "Thank you, God, for letting me see them like this." For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt at peace. He did not have money, power, or luxury, but he had love, and in that moment, it was enough. The morning after their arrival began beautifully. The ocean breeze drifted through the guest house window, carrying the soft sound of waves breaking against the shore. Sarah was humming as she unpacked breakfast. The children were already fighting playfully over who got the window seat, and for a brief moment, it felt like a dream Daniel never wanted to end. But dreams, even the sweetest ones, always meet reality. Their first full day started with excitement. They planned to explore the small town, visit the beach, and have lunch by the water. But as Daniel reached into his pocket to check the money he'd brought, his heart sank. A few unexpected costs from the journey, snacks, tickets, small souvenirs, had eaten more into their savings than he realized. What was supposed to be 3 comfortable days suddenly looked uncertain. He folded the bills carefully, forcing a smile as Ethan tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can we get ice cream after the beach?" "Of course, champ," Daniel said softly, though his chest tightened with guilt. He would make it work somehow. He always did. At the beach, the children ran wild with joy. Ethan chased the waves. Lily collected seashells. And Sarah laughed as she tried to stop them from running too far. For a while, Daniel allowed himself to forget everything. The bills, the fatigue, the fear of failure. He even joined them in building a sandcastle. His large, rough hands sculpted towers beside his children's delicate ones. When they finished, Ethan shouted, "Dad, look! It's our castle. We're the kings of the beach." Daniel laughed, truly laughed. A deep, unguarded sound that startled even himself. But then, a vendor walked by with colorful beach toys, sunglasses, and snacks. "Daddy, can we get the kite?" Ethan asked, pointing at a bright red one dancing in the air above another family. Daniel's smile faltered. The kite was beautiful, but it cost almost as much as 2 meals. He crouched down beside his son. "Not today, buddy. Maybe next time, okay?" Ethan nodded, trying to hide his disappointment, but his little face gave him away. Lily looked away, pretending to focus on her shells. Sarah gently touched Daniel's arm, whispering, "It's all right, love. They're happy. Don't worry." But he did worry. Every word of comfort only deepened the ache in his chest. By afternoon, the sky turned cloudy. A light drizzle began to fall, scattering beachgoers in every direction. Daniel quickly gathered their belongings, wrapping the kids in towels as they hurried back toward the guest house. On the way, they realized the road they had taken earlier was flooded. They took a longer path through narrow streets. By the time they reached their room, they were drenched. To make matters worse, The fan in their small room had stopped working, and the humidity was unbearable. The children complained about the heat, and Sarah struggled to hang their wet clothes near the window. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, feeling useless. "I'm sorry," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Sorry for what?" Sarah asked softly. "For this, for bringing you here. You deserve better. I thought this trip would make everything better, but I can't even keep you comfortable for one day." Sarah turned toward him, her eyes full of gentle strength. "Daniel, look at them." Ethan and Lily were sitting by the window, laughing as they made shadow puppets on the damp wall with the flashlight. "They're not thinking about money or broken fans," Sarah said. "They're just happy we're together. Don't you see? You gave them that." Daniel looked at his children, their innocent joy, and for a brief moment, he felt the weight lift. But it didn't last long. That evening, the family went out to a small cafe near the beach for dinner. It was a cozy place, filled with tourists and the warm scent of fried fish. Daniel had chosen it because it seemed simple and affordable. They ordered modestly, rice, soup, and one plate of grilled fish to share. The children were still giggling, excited about their day, when the waiter placed the bill on the table. Daniel's eyes widened as he read the total. It was nearly double what he expected. He called the waiter politely. "Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake." The waiter shook his head. "No mistake, sir. That's the price, including service charge." Daniel froze. He didn't have enough cash to cover it. Panic surged through him. His hands trembled as he counted the bills in his wallet, hoping he'd miscalculated earlier. He could feel the eyes of other diners on him. Sarah noticed his unease immediately and whispered, "What's wrong?" "The bill. I didn't bring enough," he said, voice barely audible. Before embarrassment could fully set in, Sarah discreetly opened her purse and pulled out a few folded notes she had hidden away. She placed them in his hand. "For emergencies," she said softly, smiling to ease his pride. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat burning with shame. After paying, he walked out of the cafe with a forced smile, holding Sarah's hand tightly. But inside, his heart was breaking. He had worked so hard to make this trip perfect, and yet he felt smaller than ever, a man who couldn't even buy his family a meal without help. Later that night, when everyone had fallen asleep, Daniel sat again on the small balcony. The sea stretched before him, dark and endless, the waves whispering in the distance. He rested his head in his hands, tears welling in his tired eyes. "Why do I keep failing?" he whispered to himself. "I tried so hard, and still, it's not enough." He thought about the long nights, the double shifts, the coins saved in secret, all leading to this moment of humiliation and doubt. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't hear Sarah open the door behind him. She came and sat beside him silently for a long moment before speaking. "Daniel," she said softly, "do you know what the children said before they fell asleep?" He shook his head. "Ethan said this was the best day of his life because he saw the ocean with his dad. And Lily said she's never seen you laugh that much before." Daniel turned toward her, eyes glistening. "They don't see what you see, love," she continued. "They don't see your failures. They only see your love." Sarah took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Stop trying to make everything perfect. Just be here with us. That's all we ever wanted." Her words sank deep into him, quieting the storm inside. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to breathe, to simply exist in that moment, surrounded by love he had always feared he was unworthy of. Morning sunlight broke through the thin curtains of the guest house, bathing the room in golden warmth. Sarah was still asleep beside him, her hand resting gently over his chest. Daniel lay quietly, listening to the rhythmic breathing of his family, the sound like a hymn after a long storm. He had barely slept. The memories of the previous night, the cafe, the shame, The quiet comfort from Sarah replayed in his mind again and again. But alongside the heaviness, a subtle new feeling stirred within him. A strange calm, a whisper that told him perhaps this trip was not the disaster he thought it was. He rose carefully, dressed, and stepped out into the early morning. The beach was almost empty, except for a few fishermen hauling their nets. The tide shimmered beneath the rising sun, and for the first time, Daniel noticed how breathtaking it all was. As he watched the fishermen work, he noticed an older man sitting nearby. Wrinkled face, weathered hands, a quiet dignity about him. He was mending a torn net with patient fingers, humming an old tune. Daniel nodded politely. "Beautiful morning," he said. "Every morning is," the old man replied with a faint smile. "We just forget to look." Daniel smiled weakly and sat a few feet away, staring at the waves. The man glanced at him. "You're not from here, are you?" "No," Daniel said. "Just visiting with my family. First time we've ever taken a vacation." "Ah," the man said knowingly. "And how's it going?" Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not as I hoped. I wanted it to be perfect for them. But everything keeps going wrong. I keep going wrong." The man chuckled softly, tying off the end of the net. "Do you know what happens when you pull a net too tight, son?" Daniel looked at him curiously. "It snaps," the man said. "But when you leave some give, a little space, it holds the catch better. Life's the same way. If you try to make it perfect, it breaks. If you let it flow, it holds together." Daniel fell silent, absorbing the simplicity of that truth. "Your family doesn't need perfection," the man continued. "They need you. Laughing, living, being here. You see this net. Every knot tells a story. Some are loose, some are tight, but together they make it strong. Families are like that." The words struck Daniel deeply. He stared at the sea, feeling something shift inside him. A slow unraveling of the guilt that had bound his heart for years. He turned to thank the man, but the fisherman had already stood up and begun walking toward his boat, leaving Daniel with the repaired net and a quiet, peaceful smile. When Daniel returned to the guest house, the children were awake and hungry. Sarah greeted him with a teasing grin. "Early bird today. Where did you go?" "Just for a walk," Daniel replied, a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "And I think I finally found what I came here for." "Oh, what's that?" Sarah asked. Daniel smiled. "Perspective." He gathered the family around and announced, "No more plans. No more worrying about what we can't afford. Today, we're just going to enjoy whatever comes." "Deal," the children cheered. Though they didn't quite understand what he meant, Sarah simply nodded, recognizing something different in his tone. Something stronger, freer. They spent the day exploring the town on foot. No expensive rides, no restaurants, just small, joyful discoveries. They stumbled upon a local fair in the market square where music played and people danced barefoot on the cobblestones. A vendor offered free samples of local fruit. The children laughed as they tried the strange, tangy flavors. At one stall, Ethan spotted a small wooden flute carved in the shape of a bird. The vendor smiled. "For your son," he said, handing it to Daniel. "Oh, I can't afford," Daniel began, but the man waved him off. "Consider it a gift. A father traveling with his family deserves a blessing." Daniel accepted it with gratitude, his heart swelling with humility. Later, they walked down to the beach again, this time with nothing but a blanket and a bag of homemade sandwiches. The children played in the water, their laughter blending with the sound of the waves. Daniel sat beside Sarah, watching them. "I spent years thinking happiness was something I had to buy," he said softly. "But look at them. They're happier now than they've ever been." Sarah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You gave them your time, Daniel. That's something no money can replace. He nodded slowly, watching Ethan play his little flute while Lily danced barefoot in the sand. The sight carved itself into his soul as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant gold and crimson. Ethan ran toward Daniel with his flute. "Dad, let's make a wish!" he shouted. Daniel laughed. "A wish? Yeah, you close your eyes and blow the flute, and it will carry your wish to the sky," Ethan explained, face glowing with excitement. Daniel took the flute gently and held it to his lips. He closed his eyes and whispered silently, "Thank you for this moment. Please let me never forget it." He blew softly, and a sweet note rose into the twilight. Carried away by the sea breeze, Lily clapped, Sarah smiled, and Ethan shouted, "See, Dad, the sky heard you." For the first time in many years, Daniel believed it might be true. That night, the family sat together outside their room, sharing stories under a sky full of stars. There was no electricity, no music, just laughter, warmth, and peace. Daniel looked at each of them, realizing that this trip had not gone wrong. It had gone right in every way that truly mattered. It stripped away his pride, his fears, his obsession with money, and showed him what he already had: love, unity, and the priceless beauty of family. He thought again of the old fisherman and his words. "If you try to make it perfect, it breaks." Daniel smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The next morning, the family woke up before sunrise. The soft murmur of waves echoed through the open window, and the horizon glowed faintly pink. Sarah turned to Daniel with a sleepy smile. "You're up early again," she murmured. "Couldn't sleep," Daniel replied gently. "Didn't want to miss this." He was already standing near the window, watching the dawn break. The light painted his face, revealing something new: calmness, not the tired, worried expression Sarah had seen so often, but a quiet confidence, a man finally at peace with himself. They decided to spend their last full day just wandering. No destinations, no schedules. Daniel carried the picnic basket, while Sarah held Lily's hand, and Ethan skipped ahead with his little wooden flute. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. Birds called overhead, and vendors were setting up for the morning market. The family bought a loaf of warm bread, a few bananas, and shared them on a bench overlooking the sea. They laughed as Ethan tried to feed the seagulls, and Lily teased him when one nearly stole his food. Every laugh, every smile, seemed to erase another line of worry from Daniel's face. "I never noticed how beautiful simple things are," Daniel said softly. Sarah turned to him, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Maybe you were too busy trying to survive," she said. "Now you're living." Those words struck him deeply. He realized how much of his life had been spent running. From bills, from shame, from his own fear of failing. But now, standing there in the breeze, holding his family close, he finally understood that he had never failed at all. Later, they returned to the beach one final time. The tide was low, leaving tide pools that shimmered like mirrors. Lily squealed as she spotted tiny crabs darting between shells. And Ethan began building another sandcastle, bigger and better than before. Daniel joined them again, helping shape the walls. This time, he wasn't thinking about money or appearances. He was simply there, laughing, teaching, getting his hands dirty. "Dad, look! This time we made a bridge," Ethan said proudly, pointing at the tiny channel he had dug between two towers. Daniel smiled. "A bridge, huh? That's what families are. Bridges. We build them every day so we can stay connected, no matter what comes between us." Sarah overheard him and smiled warmly. "You sound like a poet now." "Maybe I'm just finally learning what matters," Daniel replied, meeting her eyes with a quiet affection. that spoke louder than any words. As they were preparing to leave the beach, the old fisherman from before appeared once again, walking slowly with his net slung over his shoulder. Daniel recognized him instantly. "Hey, I never thanked you properly for what you said the other day," he called out. The old man smiled, his eyes glinting with warmth. "Ah, you found your peace, I see." Daniel nodded. "I think I did. You were right. Life's not about making everything perfect." The old man chuckled. "No, it's about making it real." He looked at Ethan and Lily, then reached into his basket and handed Daniel a small seashell necklace. Simple, handmade, strung with twine. "A reminder," he said, "so you don't forget what you found here." Daniel accepted it, his eyes misty. "Thank you. I won't forget." The fisherman smiled one last time before walking away, leaving footprints in the sand that the waves soon washed away, like a symbol of wisdom passing through quietly, leaving only lessons behind. That evening, they returned to the guest house for their final night. The children were tired but happy, lying side by side on the bed as Sarah packed their things. Daniel watched them, his heart full. "Do you realize," Sarah said smiling, "we didn't buy a single expensive thing, yet we have more memories than we could ever fit in a suitcase." Daniel chuckled, "And more peace than I ever thought possible." He walked to the balcony, looking out at the ocean one last time. The necklace the fisherman gave him hung around his neck. He touched it gently and whispered, "Thank you." Sarah came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You know," she said softly, "I think this trip changed more than we expected." Daniel nodded. "It did. It changed me." The next morning, they boarded the bus back home. The journey that once felt long and uncertain now felt light and hopeful. The children talked non-stop about their adventures, the shells they collected, the fair, the sea, the laughter. Daniel sat quietly, holding Sarah's hand, his eyes glistening with contentment. As the bus rumbled down the road, Ethan leaned over and asked, "Dad, can we go again next year?" Daniel laughed. "We'll see, buddy. But remember, a vacation isn't about where we go. It's about being together." Ethan nodded seriously, clutching his little flute like a treasure. Weeks later, back home, Daniel's co-workers noticed something different about him. He no longer carried the same heaviness in his shoulders. He smiled more, spoke kindly, and even began taking weekends off to spend with his family. He didn't earn more money, but his heart was richer than ever. On one quiet evening, as he sat on the porch, watching his children play in the fading sunlight, he thought to himself, "All those years I chased what I thought made a man. Money, success, respect. But it turns out it was right here all along. In their laughter, in her smile, in moments that cost nothing but mean everything." A soft wind blew through the yard. Ethan lifted the same wooden flute and played a few notes, the tune dancing through the air, carrying echoes of the ocean and the lessons learned. Daniel smiled, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself, "That trip didn't just change everything. It saved me." The morning they left the coastal town was quiet and bittersweet. The early sky was a blend of pink and grey, and the sea breeze carried the faint scent of salt and promise. Daniel loaded their worn suitcases into the bus's storage compartment, while Sarah and the children stood by the roadside, watching the waves in silence. Ethan clutched his little wooden flute tightly. Lily held a seashell she had collected the day before. The one, she said, sounded like the ocean. Sarah turned to Daniel and whispered, "Feels strange to leave, doesn't it?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, but I think we're not really leaving it behind. A part of this place will stay with us. In here." He tapped his chest lightly. the bus engine roared to life, and they boarded. As they pulled away, Daniel looked out the window one last time. The fisherman's figure was barely visible on the beach, tending his nets. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw him glance up and raise a hand, as if in silent farewell. Daniel smiled faintly, whispering, "Thank you, old man." The ride back home felt different from the tense journey that had brought them there. The children were cheerful, chatting about every little memory. The fair, the sandcastle, the funny seagull that stole Ethan's food. Even Sarah seemed lighter, her laughter frequent and unrestrained. She leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder as the bus rolled through hills and towns. "I think we found what we were missing," she said softly. "We did," Daniel replied. "It wasn't the trip, it was us." He looked at his family, the children glowing with innocence, Sarah with her quiet grace, and realized that they had returned not from a vacation, but from a rebirth. When they reached their small neighborhood, the familiar sights looked different, brighter somehow. The cracked pavements, the old houses, even the small grocery store on the corner, all seemed to hold a quiet charm. The neighbors greeted them curiously. "Ah, so you finally took that vacation," one of them said with a laugh. "Must have been expensive, huh?" Daniel just smiled. More valuable than expensive. They didn't understand what he meant, but Sarah, standing beside him, did. She squeezed his hand gently. Inside their modest home, everything felt strangely new. The same walls that once echoed with quiet worry now felt alive with laughter. The children unpacked their small souvenirs, shells, drawings, and the wooden flute, placing them proudly on a shelf. Lily wrote "Our best trip ever" on a piece of paper and taped it above the shelf. Ethan added, "Next time we'll build an even bigger sandcastle." Daniel chuckled. "We sure will." But deep down, he knew this trip had already built something far greater. A castle of memories, love, and gratitude that no tide could ever wash away. The days that followed revealed just how deeply Daniel had changed. He went back to work at the construction site, but his co-workers noticed something different about him. He still worked hard, still came early and stayed late, but his spirit was no longer burdened. He smiled often, whistled while working, and even bought coffee for others when he could. One day, his supervisor, Mr. Howard, said, "You look different, Daniel. Did that vacation really do that much good?" Daniel grinned. "It reminded me why I work in the first place." "And why's that?" Daniel looked toward the sky and said simply, "So I can go home and smile with my family, not just provide for them." Evenings became sacred. Daniel no longer came home too tired to talk. Instead, he played board games with the children, helped Lily with her drawings, and listened to Ethan practice tunes on his flute. Sarah noticed that he had stopped sighing at bills and stopped worrying over every coin. They still didn't have much, but their hearts were full. One Sunday, Daniel surprised everyone. "Let's go for a picnic," he said suddenly. "But we don't have a park near..." Sarah began, but he interrupted, smiling. "We'll go to the old hill by the water tower. It's not far. We'll bring sandwiches, and that'll be our little adventure." The children cheered, and Sarah just shook her head, laughing. That afternoon, they sat under a tree on that quiet hill, watching the sunset. Ethan played his flute while Lily tried to whistle along. Daniel lay on the grass beside Sarah, holding her hand, feeling the same peace he had found at the ocean. "Who needs fancy places?" he murmured. "Happiness was just waiting for us to notice it." Sarah smiled softly. And we finally did. Weeks later, Daniel received unexpected news. His supervisor recommended him for a better paying position. When asked why, the supervisor said, "You've changed, Daniel. You carry yourself differently now. You lead by example. Keep it up." Daniel accepted the opportunity with humility, tears welling in his eyes as he called Sarah that evening. You won't believe this, love. They promoted me. Daniel, that's wonderful. Maybe the old fisherman was right, Daniel said, smiling through his voice. When you stop chasing what's missing and start loving what you have, blessings find you on their own. Sarah's voice softened. See, the trip really did change everything. From that day forward, Daniel carried the fisherman's necklace with him to work every day, tucked beneath his shirt, close to his heart. It reminded him that peace isn't earned through money, but through love, faith, and gratitude. He also began setting aside a few coins every week, not for another grand vacation, but for small moments, ice cream sundaes, movie nights, short walks by the river. Every small joy mattered now. In the evenings, the family often sat outside together. The wind would hum softly through the trees, and Ethan would play his flute. The same tune Daniel had blown into the sea during sunset on that unforgettable day. It had become their family's song, a melody of healing, love, and new beginnings. The evening air was calm, carrying the soft scent of jasmine from the small garden outside the Harris home. Daniel sat on the porch, the wooden flute in Ethan's hands beside him, and the seashell necklace from the old fisherman glinting softly against his chest. The children were inside, playing quietly with Lily's drawings spread across the floor, while Sarah tidied the kitchen. For a long moment, Daniel simply breathed, watching the fading sunlight paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. His heart was full in a way he had never imagined possible. Not because he had more money, status, or recognition, but because he had finally learned the true meaning of fatherhood, family, and happiness. Daniel's mind drifted back over the weeks that had passed. The trip, the struggles, the laughter, the tears. He remembered the exhaustion of working double shifts, the shame of not being able to provide luxuries, the setbacks on the beach, and the embarrassment at the cafe. And yet, he also remembered the moments that had transformed him. Ethan's simple drawing of their dream vacation, asking only for togetherness. The quiet wisdom of the fisherman who taught him that perfection breaks, but love holds. The laughter of his children as they ran barefoot on the sand, entirely free and unburdened. Sarah's unwavering faith in him, gently reminding him that he was enough. For the first time in years, Daniel understood something profound. Life's greatest riches are not counted in coins or possessions. They are measured in moments, memories, and love shared with those who matter most. Daniel touched the seashell necklace around his neck. It had become more than a trinket. It was a symbol of his journey, a reminder that even the simplest gestures of love can have the deepest impact. He spoke softly to himself, as if sharing a secret with the universe. I worked so hard to give them everything, but what they needed was me, my presence, my laughter, my love. That is what matters. That is what makes a life rich. He thought about fathers everywhere, burdened with worry, guilt, and the relentless pursuit of material success. He thought of the countless children who longed for simple moments of connection, for a father to simply be there. Daniel's heart ached with gratitude and hope. He realized that his journey was not just about a vacation, but about awakening to the true wealth of life. The evening deepened into night. Daniel rose and peeked into the living room. Ethan was asleep with the flute tucked under his arm. Lily was curled up with her favorite drawing book. Sarah sat quietly, watching them both with a soft smile. Daniel returned to the porch, breathing in the cool night air. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace and purpose. No longer was he merely surviving. He was living, fully, intentionally, and with love as his guide. He whispered into the quiet night, "This trip didn't just give them memories. It gave me a heart I thought I had lost. It gave me them, fully and completely." He smiled, knowing that the lessons of this journey would ripple through every day of their lives. Laughter over perfection, love over guilt, presence over possessions. From the open window, Ethan stirred and murmured sleepily, "Dad!" "It sounds like the ocean." Daniel smiled, his eyes glistening. "It is the ocean, son. The same one we found together. And it will always remind us to carry joy, love, and hope wherever we go." The stars shimmered above, reflecting in Daniel's eyes. He felt a profound certainty. Life's true wealth was not in what he earned or achieved, but in the love he shared, the memories he made, and the courage to be fully present for his family. The Harris family's journey was more than a vacation. It was a lesson in gratitude, presence, and the immeasurable power of love. Happiness is found not in what you can buy, but in the moments you live fully with those you love. True transformation comes when you let go of perfection and embrace love, laughter, and connection. Every small gesture, a smile, a hug, a shared laugh, can change lives more than any grand gesture ever could. As Daniel leaned back in the porch chair, the night wind carrying the faint sound of waves in his memory, he whispered, "We don't need to go far to find happiness. We just need to be together, and that is everything."